we're going to use a tool as part of today's class, and it's called the Kutri Team Roles. You've got information in your packet. If you take a look on page 3, you can reference it. We are not going into a theoretical basis. We're just using this for a framework. So I'm going to talk about it just for a few minutes. But it's very, very important that you get the concept. I'm not worried about you remembering the terms right now, but I want you to think about the concepts. And the concept is very simple. The idea is that there are specific roles that each of us tend to gravitate toward. Okay? And if we recognize what that tendency is, that can help us better manage ourselves and those around us. And especially when you're in a team environment and you have multiple people responding to different roles, it's important to recognize how that plays out. This model really talks about 8 different primary roles. And if you take a look on your page, you can follow along with this. Those 8 roles fall into 3 primary categories. The first one is our thinking roles, or how we tend to come up with new ideas. And there are 2 primary roles underneath of that category. The first one is an idea generator. And an idea generator are the creative people that come up with new ideas all the time. They're always out there, just they can create images in their mind. And the second one is an arbiter. And an arbiter is very, very logical, very structured. Now, if you can tell, those are 2 very different approaches to coming up with new ideas. But they still fall into that idea of a thinking role, whether it's logical progression of how it plays out, or the creative ideas that are new and unusual. The second group are called connecting roles. And the connecting roles, there are really 3 primary ones that we're looking at. The first is a resource seeker, and they're looking external to your group as to who we can connect to. Okay, very important from a resource standpoint. The second is a consensus builder, which are your team players. We want to make sure that everybody's bought into this. It's focused on harmony and working together, cooperation. And the third one are the conductors. And the conductors are the ones that tend to take more of the leadership roles. They want to be out in front. They want to be orchestrating things. Okay, a little more comfort in front of other people. So again, you can see that all of those are connecting the different pieces. The resource seeker external to the group, the consensus builder building more of harmony or cooperation within the team, the conductor more of leading the way. Okay? The last group are the action roles, the roles that are actually targeting getting something accomplished. And there are 3 that fall into this category. The first one is the implementer, which are your task-driven individuals or style. I need to get this done. What do we need to do to get the job done? The second one are the checkers. They're kind of your perfectionists. They are very critical and want to make sure things are done right. Okay? They are very, very careful and precise. And the last one are your change advocates. And your change advocates, they have 2 pieces to them. One is they love a challenge. So ones that are up for a big challenge, but they're also open to change things to maintain that challenge. Now, one thing that's interesting here too, just so you can see how these roles play out, the change advocates are not necessarily creative people. They may not have the ideas to change. That comes from the idea generators. The idea generators may or may not be change advocates. Okay, so just because you have the idea doesn't mean you're going to act on it. Those are 2 different aspects. But big picture-wise, here are 8 roles. These are 8 roles that I think we can all relate to. We can see people fill those different categories. The point is each one of us has a preferred style. We tend to fall within one of those, or gravitate toward one of those categories. And there are also some categories that we tend to avoid. Okay? Those aspects of how we operate in a team environment are very important. The reason I'm saying it's important is if you take a look at any project cycle, projects have different stages. And there are all different models of project management, but we're going to use a simple one here that includes brainstorming, evaluation, decision-making, implementing, and controlling. Okay, those are very, very common ways of looking at project management. But if you think about those different categories, those different steps in a project management cycle, and then you look at the different roles that people tend to fill, you can tell that different roles are more appropriate at different times. So for instance, at brainstorming, during brainstorming, you don't want somebody evaluating whether it's the best idea or not. You just want to come up with new ideas. And those new ideas tend to come from your idea generators, your resource seekers who are bringing in ideas from externally, as well as change advocates. But then as you get into evaluation, when you start evaluating those ideas, you don't want to keep coming up with new ideas because you never get anything done. In evaluation, you want to start looking at it logically. So you start looking at your arbiters and checkers. That style tends to be most effective at that stage. And as you can skim through the rest of this to see where the different styles play out for the rest of the cycle. But my point is that different styles are more effective at different times in different situations. It's not rocket science. It makes sense. The point being is that if I gravitate toward a specific style, for instance, if I'm a very creative person, if I'm one of those idea generators, I need to be very cautious that I don't get in the way of certain stages within a project cycle. I want to use my strength where it is a strength and not let it become a blind spot for me. Does that make sense to everyone? Got the idea? Great. When we look at the Kutri roles, research gives us some indications of things that we do need to be aware of. First of all, from a team perspective, every one of those roles is important. Okay, so the first thing is that every one of those roles is worth considering because it has importance at different times. That gets us to number 2, is that different roles take different priorities at different times. Everybody got it? Those are 2 that we've covered already. The last 2 are new. First one, number 3, is that a single leader is more effective than having multiple leaders or no leaders at all. The reason that's important is, guess what? In your learning team, there is nobody that is technically in charge. That is the leadership is up to you to manage. Well, if you take the approach, we're all adults and this will work out just fine. We don't need to have specified leadership. Well, you're going into a leaderless situation. That is less effective than having a clear leader or a point person. A single clear leader is the most effective approach. And that does not mean it has to be predetermined. That can evolve as the project goes. But having a clear point person is very important. And the last one on here is that everybody is responsible for monitoring that those roles are filled. It doesn't fall on just the leader or anyone else in the group. It is everyone's responsibility. So for instance, in a project cycle, if you're in evaluation and you're still coming up with new ideas and you're trying to stop that, it's everyone's responsibility to stop and say, hey, we're not doing what we need to be doing here. So it is everyone's responsibility. Does this make sense? We are going to give you took an assessment that will give you an indication of what your primary roles are as well as the roles that you avoid. And we're going to share those with you shortly and give you a chance to talk about those within your learning teams. Right now it's time for us to get to work. And the way we're going to approach this right now is we're going to divide this cluster in half. There are 14 learning teams in this room. I'm going to take 7 of those teams with me into another room to talk about teamwork and leadership for about 30 minutes. During that 30 minutes, the other 7 groups will remain in this room and meet with your peer advisors. As you meet with your peer advisor, you have a number of different things you're trying to accomplish. But overall, what you're trying to do is to have an effective dialogue. And what I mean by that is whenever we find ourselves in a team situation, we know it's important to get to know each other and to initiate that team. The problem is most of us do that on more of a social level. And what I mean by that is that we ask very superficial questions. You know, where do you come from? How many kids do you have? What do you enjoy doing? But most of those things are not directly relevant to how we operate in a team environment. What I want you to do with your peer advisor today is to have an effective dialogue targeting your learning team. And if you think back to some of the problems that we said were most common in team environments, those are the things I want you to address. You'll talk about what some of your common goals are, what some of your expectations are, which are based on your experience of working in team environments. You also get your Kutri results back, your team roles, and I want you to talk about what roles you gravitate to. That gives you an indication of where some of your team's strengths and challenges may be. Keep in mind also, as you talk about the Kutri, it is not a diagnostic tool. If you are missing people in one specific category, it does not mean you will have trouble there. But it is worth talking about it to see if it is something that you may not pay attention to on a normal basis. How can you pay attention to it and how can you accommodate that area? So it becomes the foundation for discussion as opposed to a diagnostic tool to say this is where we are going to have problems. Okay? It is meant to be a discussion to help lay that initial foundation for your team. After 30 minutes, both of those groups will switch. The teams that were in here with your peer advisors will join me in the breakout room. Those of you who were with me in the breakout room will come in here with your peer advisors. Go for another 30 minutes. At the end of that, we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll start back in here and get back up and running for a project that involves everyone in this cluster. Is everybody clear? Great.